Perfect. Says that we're live. So,
We
hi
are.
everybody. I don't know if you recognize this famous person beside me, but this is Renée Gendron. She is a multi-genre romance author, and I would say famous on Twitter, where she has almost 21,000 people following her. We were supposed to talk on Sunday, and we did talk on Sunday, but with technical difficulties, only 6 seconds were broadcasted. Although a few of you did like and share that, she has graciously agreed to give us 10 minutes. That's all we're getting. Okay, so we gotta be right at the gate. And so, what I want to do right away is talk about ghosts. Because did you know that in addition to writing about romance, Renee also writes about ghosts, folklore, myths? Please take it away, Renee.
Okay. Well, Melissa, it's always a pleasure chatting with you. It's always a pleasure to be able to share our stories and see where we're going in our careers. Melissa and I know each other in real life, and it's always nice to find collaborations. So thank you for this opportunity to re-engage with you and to chat with others. Um, and ghosts, right? That's the common theme. We're coming up in October. I decided to write a short story for Amuse Bush Review on ghosts that investigate hauntings. And that I just found that so interesting. And I know that we used to collaborate on Amuse Bush Review, and you also have your toe in the waters with other supernatural elements. And not only do you have your new Hope C coming out with paranormal, but you also wrote a werewolf story for us, and that was super fascinating, right? I thoroughly enjoyed how you write across different platforms, different genres, and always have that thread of medical professionals and always angling towards something real and gritty and so interesting. So it's lovely to chat with you again and to know more about your work and just to be here. So thank you.
Oh my goodness. Okay, that was very kind of you to mention the Shapes of Wrath, but we're actually here today to talk to Renee about her fantastic work. So I understand that you have a new book that just came out. Can you tell us about that, please? And I
Uh,
put it in the chat.
Sure. Thank you. I appreciate that. So I do have the ninth star right here. I'm not much for Twitter for backgrounds. I apologize. It's it's part of a duology that I co-wrote with fellow Twitter author David Simon, and I wrote the Canadian portion of the book one, and then he is writing from the American perspective in novella two. And it's got leprechauns, Canadian folklore. It's got North myths. I can't talk today. So it has a little bit of supernatural romance, historical fiction elements to it, and it was just a great pleasure to collaborate with David on this project. And I have to mention that also on Twitter, it was Chapel Orphans anthology Heads or Tails that brought David and I together. So thank you to the Twitter writing community for encouraging and supporting that project from the start. Thanks.
That's fantastic. And actually, before we went live, you had mentioned where the title came from. Could you
Oh,
just explain the ninth star?
right. So this is a historical fiction thing based in the War of 1812, Detroit on the American side, Windsor on the Canadian side, and one of the characters is Québécoise. And there's a French Canadian myth that if a woman counts 9 stars, 9 nights in a row, the ninth star on the last night will lead her to her husband or her future husband. And that's sort of the premise of my novella, right? So she finds this man under the ninth star, and she's not convinced that this man is going to be her husband, but it's a romance, and of course they get together at the end, right? So,
And so I hope people can see the link in the chat. In fact, maybe I'll just put a star. Apparently, I can star that. So you can just go straight there and people can read an excerpt, right?
sorry, a car passed by
I
outside, and I
know,
missed
right then, bad timing. If they go right to that link, then they can read an excerpt of
that.
your beautiful novel, right?
Absolutely right. Yes, thank you. Right. Um, and I was just going to chat a little bit about your work, Melissa, because I just love the grittiness and the realisticness of your work. I've followed Hope across several books, and I just seen her progress, and so it's really interesting to see how in depth that character is, and how I really appreciate your writing for how real it is, and you really get a sense of her in book one being curious about the city, being a little bit anxious about trying to fit into her new workplace, and finding her way through what are what she hopes are colleagues that might become friends and who are friends, and then they kind of have a falling out. So I just wanted to really, really, sorry, I'm touching the microphone. Never touch the microphone in an interview. Really bad habit. But I just wanted to show my appreciation for that because it's not every author that can capture an authentic voice, and I think your writing really does have an authentic voice.
Oh my
Truly,
gosh.
yeah.
Thank you so much. And so now I have to say how much I love Renee's work. So we were actually talking during our giant unbroadcasted interview about how we have some things in common. So one of the things that we both like is that we both enjoy people with challenging careers. So in my case, I'm an emergency doctor, and my main character behind me, Hope C, is a resident doctor who solves murders. And Renee was telling me about another mystery that she has, which was really interesting. Where, for example, one of them is a police officer, and one of them is a conservation officer. Did you want to mention that book, Renee?
Well, that one would be book two of the Outdoorsman series. That's a contemporary mystery romance. And book two has a conservation officer and a lawyer who also has a foraging business. So she's an intellectual property lawyer and she deals a lot with patents and copyrights and that sort of thing. But her side hustle is going through parks and foraging items to then transform them into different food elements. And her business is threatened by this unknown contaminant. And that's how she joins forces with this conservation officer to figure out what's happening. So I do like to play around with careers to give them a little bit of unpredictability and to be able to give authors, I guess, something, readers, pardon me, something fresh to read, right? It's not every day that you read about a smith as a main character or as a forager as a main character. Or in book one of my main characters was a translator, and it's just kind of interesting to play around with professions. And how many other professions do you include in the medical scene? So you're not only just writing about um, doctors, though, because I remember with one of your AMBR stories, you were writing about a paramedic.
That's
And
right. Yeah. So you had mentioned wolf ice, which is a story about werewolves who are from Montreal who want to buy a piece of land where they can go during the full moon. Because you can imagine there's not a lot of area to run around in Montreal. So they buy an area just over the border in Ontario, an old camping ground, except for there's somebody there who is hunting werewolves with a drug called wolf ice. But it happens that the love interest is also a paramedic. And so when one of them is almost killed, Jack leaps into action and is trying to resuscitate the character. So yes, absolutely. I try like doctors, nurses, paramedics, everybody's in the game for sure.
But I think one of the similarities that we have with our writing is that we also play around with emotion, right? Um, we're not always writing happy-go-lucky characters, right? We're writing often about grittiness and about sort of a wider range where characters have really, really bad days, and it takes some time for them to recover emotionally. And sometimes they don't recover, right? Sometimes they have hurts that carry from book to book. I, you
That's
know,
true.
and,
Yeah.
and that kind of informs the character arc for for multiple books or for the entire series, right?
Yes,
What would you
yeah.
say? What would you say was Hope's biggest hurt that she has still yet to resolve?
She's still resolving the love triangle, to be honest. So,
Oh, is that so long?
yeah,
Okay.
well, I don't want to spoil what happens throughout the course, but she arrives in Montreal for book one in Code Blues with the original series, single, and she ends up dating up to two guys at the same time, and it doesn't always go well. So he is officially single at the beginning of this series. So we'll see what happens.
Okay.
That's a spoiler, though.
Oh,
And
good show.
Renee, speaking of through the generations, do we have time for you to mention just with spectral investigations? Because they are like 112 years old or so.
You know what? Romances tend to really be focused on late 20, early 30-year-old characters, and there's obviously a place for that. But I intentionally make and design characters that run the entire spectrum of ages. the Outdoorsman book one, for example, the lead character is 50 years old and she's 45. And then Inspector Investigations, they're 112 years old and they've been around for a little while. And I think it just adds a different perspective on the romantic element. It adds maybe a little bit more maturity where the nature of the conflicts are a little bit different, or how they approach a challenge because they have decades, literally decades worth of experience behind them. Um, it's an interesting dynamic to explore, or at least to consider when writing the spectrum of characters. Yeah.
Could
But
I add two things there?
yeah.
Um, First of all, there is a trend, I've noticed in mystery anyway, where they have older investigators. Like one series was specifically recommended to me where she's a senior citizen. They're like she and her husband are both senior citizens. I think it's the Jeannie Dam series. And then the other one that I wanted to add was that I do have a series that I don't usually talk about, but I do love, which is the Italian School for Assassins
Okay.
and the Goa Yoga School of Slayers. It'll be at least three books, but she is 40
Right.
and she's a public servant who goes to the Italian School for Assassins for her 40th birthday. And just
Great
for
gift.
fun, but not taking it seriously and then realizing they are actually assassins there.
Right. Right.
So like a lot of chaos. And when I was starting to write it, I was just like, oh, this guy is actually the romantic lead, and I totally didn't expect it. So it was interesting to see. And so I agree with you that we need more diversity in all ways, including in age.
Oh,
Like the world is not entirely made up of people who are 20 or 30 years old.
right. And especially in the romance section, right, where you need to understand that marriages change. So
Mm.
maybe you married at 20 or at 30, 35, and not all will continue for the duration of your life. So you do have quite a significant part of the population that are in their 40s or older and who are interested in pursuing a romantic relationship. Why would they be excluded from being represented in the genre that's there for romantic relationships, right? Why would you turn them away? So yeah, so I think you have a Kickstarter campaign, don't you, right now for
Oh,
you?
yes, I do.
I
Yes,
think all right,
for the Shapes of Wrath. I'm just going to
right,
post that one too.
okay,
So just until October 18th.
okay.
So
So
if
now
people
that's
want to
13 days.
support, yeah, 13 days. I am going to CanCon with Renee. So if you want to come by and chat with me about it, it is about the seven deadly sins. And the first one is anger or wrath. That's why it's called the Shapes of Wrath. And it's set on the set in the operating room. And there's a very angry surgeon, and there are ghosts to tie it back to the beginning of our conversation. And
Wonderful.
I will put up my website just in case people don't get to the Kickstarter in time.
And I think so for the audience, for those who might be interested, and in Ottawa next weekend, Melissa and I are actually going to be at CanCon. And so if you're there, just say hi to us, and we'll take it
I'm
from there and see, right?
just going to find the link for CanCon. One second, because
Oh, I might
if
have that.
people don't know what it means, it
Oh,
is
it's
a
the it's
convention.
it's Canada's premier convention for sci-fi and fantasy. It's very well recognized. It's been gone for a number of years. I think this is the first year in person after the major closures for the pandemic, so there's a lot of excitement. And if you can't make it in person, they might still have hybrid tickets where you can participate online. But I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure if they sold out.
You have to check it out. But
Yeah,
Renee and I are going to be there in person.
yeah,
I will have something just like 5 copies of the Nine Star at my table.
yeah,
So if you want one, you got to come grab them because they'll be gone.
yeah. Wonderful. All right. So this is lovely chatting with you and your audience, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity to get to know more about your book and your Kickstarter campaign. And it's a wonderful project. Such a terrific character and so memorable, right? Because she's honest and she's flawed and she makes catastrophic mistakes, but she recovers and she gets better, right? And there's this beautiful resiliency about hope that really is hope, right?
Oh my
It's
gosh.
wonderful.
She speaks so wonderfully. You can tell that she's an author. I am just trying to move so you can actually see the shapes of wrath, but hopefully your audience is smart enough they can figure out the title. Oh, see, I can't do it. I can't do it. I'm just blocking myself. Anyway, it is the shapes of wrath. And I hope you can just see how generous and wonderful Renee is as a person. The fact that I wasted 45 minutes of her time on Sunday and then she came back again to give 15 minutes of her time, as well as writing, is it 4 or 6 series now?
Starting 2023, I will have 6 series on the go. But I'm always open and receptive to reader feedback. I've got short stories in different genres on Amuse-Bouche Review, for example. I float ideas sometimes on my newsletter list. And if there's an interest, if there's uptake, I will write to interest, right? It might take me 6 months or a year to kind of cycle through that story to make sure that it's in production. But I'm always open to feedback to see how I can do better, write better, and better engage with readers. So
Yes,
never hesitate to reach
absolutely.
out.
So, for example, I am pushing Renee on the spectral investigations. And so she's then going to consider adding a novella for that in 2023. So if you love some of her work, please don't be shy. She put her Twitter handle right on the screen so you can find her really easily. And just let her know, is there something you want to hear about? Are you dying to know about a certain the outdoorsman series, or do you like ghosts like me, or whatever you think? You can give her a little nudge. Doesn't mean that she's going to do it, but you can vote at least. This is something very cool about the new world that you weren't able to do in the past easily.
Very true. And Melissa, if you might want to put the Amuse Bush review, because we also have your archives of your wonderful stories. If people want to check out, I don't want to say your backlist because these are free stories, but you were a contributor for a year and a bit, I believe, and so you got wonderful content out there that people can check out your other work and your writing style. And on the flip side, maybe nudge you to continue a story or to expand on something.
I had put in the AMBR review earlier, but I put it through again because it's Renee, but it's also a number of very talented individuals. And so you can meet, I'm going to say, 6 or more authors through AMBR.
6 active right now, but we also have archives that are freely accessible for perhaps another half dozen to a dozen authors that have contributed at various times. Again, this is free. You can pick out which authors or which genres you like. Each month has a unique theme, and we try to get more creative. It's not just about disasters, for example. It's cli-fi or something like that. So we do our best to be creative and to put out content on a monthly basis. So I encourage everybody to check out Melissa's work and also the sort of backlist of previous contributors to Amuse-Bush Review. So
Yes, so she said like she's always civic minded, so she's letting other people know. But please support this fantastic woman. We love her, both her work and as a person.
thank you so much. I appreciate that, and you're going to give me a fat head, but I'll take the ego boost. All right. So Melissa, I'm afraid I have to run, but
Let's
it's
go.
always a pleasure chatting with you, and I hope to be able to. Well, I'll see you next weekend, really. So we'll
See
catch
you
up
at
again in
CanCon.
person, right? And again, thank you to you and to your wonderful audience, and I hope everybody has a wonderful evening.
Wonderful day, everybody.
Thank you.